Goeiemôre almal en welkom by die eerste sessie van Nasie in Gesprek. Vir die persone wat aanlyn luister, welkom vir julle ook. Vandag gesels ons oor die ekonomiese realiteit van om te boer in Suid-Afrika vandag. Hier waar ons vandag staan ons boere voor ongekende druk. Insetkoste is hoog, graanpryse is laag en ons staan voor 'n waarskynlike El Niño vir die volgende seisoen wat hulle voorspel as 'n super El Niño. Nou, as ons kyk na boere, wanneer markomstandighede en klimaatstoestande negatief draai, dan tref dit ons boere heel eerste. En dan sit hulle met dit. So die vraag vandag waar ons mee begin is, moet jy boer of moet jy nie boer nie? En daai vraag is eintlik nie Theo vir my 'n vraag nie, want ons weet ons het boere nodig. Die groter vraag vir my is, hoe kan almal in die waardeketting help dat ons boere kan volhoubaar wees oor die langtermyn en hoe werk ons saam om dit te verseker? Want as ek as landboubesigheid, as boere nie volhoubaar is nie, dan is my besigheid ook nie volhoubaar nie. En so al die spelers in die waardeketting. So ons gaan nou kyk na 'n inleidende video en dan gaan ons oorgee vir die paneel vir die gesprek. Baie dankie.
Farming has never been easy, but for many, the question today is no longer how to farm better, it's whether farming still makes sense at all. Across South Africa, farmers are navigating rising costs, unpredictable markets, and shrinking margins. And for some, the numbers are no longer adding up. Input costs have surged: fuel, fertilizer, seed, finance. At the same time, prices remain volatile, shaped by global forces far beyond the farm gate. Add to that infrastructure challenges, logistics bottlenecks, and climate uncertainty, and the margin for error becomes razor thin. For commercial farmers, efficiency is no longer optional. For smaller producers, survival itself is under pressure.
So this is a continuous process where we are continuously producing more and selling more at a cheaper price, being more efficient, and then able to put our products on the market at a lower price because we became more efficient. Now, this thing has been running for a number of decades, and earlier this year, as we were getting ready for our Congress, we already knew that we were in trouble. International markets are overflooded, too much maize, too many other products available on the market, and producer prices have dropped to a very low level. And then all of a sudden, the war in Iran happened. We are looking at input prices, specifically fuel and fertilizer, increasing by anything to 30 to 40%, and that is before the next cycle of rate adjustments are happening. And this is adding to the cost. So if you think about it like this, before March, before the war, input cost, fertilizer and fuel was about 45% of a farmer's costs. Now you can imagine what that looks like after a 30 and a 40% increase in diesel and in fertilizers. So we are in a crisis of epic proportions between historically low international prices, historically high input prices. Something's got to give. Farmers got to decide, what are we going to do?
To stay viable, farmers are being forced to make difficult choices. Scale up or step out. Invest in efficiency or cut back on risk. Chase yield or protect long-term sustainability. But each decision comes with trade-offs, and not every farmer has the same room to maneuver. For many, this is no longer just a business calculation. It's a question of legacy, identity, and the future of family farming.
Sekere industrieë is vandag onder druk, ja. As ons gaan kyk byvoorbeeld na die graanbedryf, die lewende hawebedryf, rooi vleis spesifiek, dan is daar definitief baie meer druk as 'n paar jaar gelede. As mens gaan kyk na die uitvoergedrewe industrieë binne landbou, dan is daar eintlik nog bietjie ruimte vir beweeglikheid. Ons moet onthou, binne landbou is dit 'n sikliese bedryf. Landbou is nie soos 'n vervaardigingsbedryf of mynbou wat elke jaar dieselfde is nie. Dit elke jaar verskil. Hierdie jaar verskil aansienlik van wat verlede jaar gebeur het. Wat in 'n distrik gebeur, verskil ook. Buurmanne is nie dieselfde nie. En hoe hulle besighede bestuur is nie dieselfde nie. So een ou kan dieselfde industrie wees, maar hy kan aansienlike meer druk ervaar, finansiële druk byvoorbeeld, as wat sy buurman doen. En daar gaan dit oor die besluite wat geneem is. Finansiële besluite wat geneem is in goeie tye, hoe affekteer dit jou in die slegte tye? Ons moet ook gaan kyk na wat het boere gedoen om daardie druk dalk so 'n bietjie te verlig, om homself te verskans daarteen. Diversifikasie, en dan praat ek nie van 'n graanboer wat 'n lewende hawe bedryf of 'n beeskomponent inbring nie. Ons praat ook van geografiese diversifikasie, want binne distrikte verskil dit selfs. Ek weet jy kan gaan kyk om jouself te verskans teen klimaatsveranderinge of klimaatsomstandighede om in 'n ander provinsie te produseer. Maar dan natuurlik ook is daar die moontlikheid van vertikale integrasie.
And yet, South African farmers are nothing if not resilient. Across the country, producers are adopting new technologies, diversifying income streams, finding smarter, more efficient ways to farm. But resilience alone is not a strategy. For agriculture to remain viable, the broader system must work too. From policy certainty to infrastructure, to market access and financing. Because ultimately, the question is not just about today's farmers, but about the next generation. If you were starting today, would you choose to farm? And if the answer is no, what needs to change to make it yes? At a time when agriculture must feed a growing population and drive economic growth, can farming still stand as a viable business? Welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first session this year of Nation in Conversation. Over the next few days, there will be another 6 sessions. We're looking forward to it. I specifically want to thank Debbie. Debbie, thank you very much. I do think this is a great asset that you and your fellow sponsors bring to NAMPU. So thank you very much, Debbie. We look forward to it. And then we have the pleasure, Francois. You all know Francois Strydom. This was his brainchild. So Francois, thank you very much. I think over the years this has made a massive contribution in setting the themes, setting the agenda for discussions. Thank you very much, Francois. From my side, I want to welcome my panel. I think this is the A-team. If you look at history, if you look at involvement in organized agriculture, if you look at successful grain farming, I think I've got the A-team. So please, let's welcome the panel. Thank you very much, guys. Capital is a coward. Capital runs away. Capital doesn't like risk. But farming, one element of farming, it is capital intensive. And capital needs to work. And the calculations must work. Otherwise, capital is going to bite you, and capital is going to disappear. Jaco, you were probably for 4 years when you became chairperson of Grain SA, probably the youngest chairperson. Then for 4 years, the chairperson of Agri SA, also probably the youngest chairperson. You're an engineer. You look at things from a structured, rational point of view. If you look at capital and farming, what kind of yields does it make sense?
Well, it's an interesting question. If you talk to a lot of farmers, you get the sense that it doesn't make sense. You get the sense that they're just about to finish farming, and that's not what's happening on farm level. I'm part of a grouping at Senvest where we look at information, analyze information, and then distribute the averages so you can compare yourself. And what we've seen there is in the past 10 years, the average return on investment for a farmer is about 15.8%.
Per annum.
Per annum. Now remember, this is in the central parts of the country, so it's not in general for all the grain farmers, but it's a pretty good return on your investment. That's excluding the growth in your asset in terms of the farm value. So if you add that, it's even better. The problem with that is there's a lot of risk involved. Now, we as farmers are inherent risk takers, but also risk mitigators. So you can't take that amount of risk without mitigation somewhere.
But you cannot take the risk away.
You can't take it away. And I think that's one thing. It's easy to manage the risk. If you take it away, risk-free investment is probably, if you go to the bank, although that's also not risk-free.
But in theory, just to put that into perspective, in theory, risk-free returns is probably 7 to 8% currently. That's roughly what's viewed as risk-free return.
Yeah.
So therefore, if anything above that, you have to take risk and you need to be in a position to manage that.
And that's what farmers are. And that's why we are still farming in this country and in the world. If you take the weather risk, if you take all the risks that's impacting the moment, the war in Iran, the estimate at this stage is our input cost increased by about 30% as grain farmers. And that's a risk you can't have foreseen 12 months ago. But that's something you have to adapt to. I just think in terms of the return on investment, if you look at the 10-year period, it's at 15.8%. If you go back 5 years ago and you look at the 5 years return from probably 2018 to 2022, 2021, that was only about 7%. So the cyclicality of agriculture is very important. For us is then, what do you do with that kind of return on investment? How do you manage that in terms of risk? What do you do? How do you build your business to make sure that in that lower return years that you can sustain it?
So although on average, and I'm always very careful about averages, the old saying goes that if I've got my one foot in a pot of boiling water and my other foot on a bucket of ice, on average I'm fairly comfortable. But that's not what it is in farming. In farming there's great years and there's massive troughs. Japie Grobler, for those of you who don't know, you probably all passed his farm just on the Klerksdorp side of us. Japie, I must say it's great to have you here. Probably one of the doyens of the, not only of organized agriculture, but of the farming community in South Africa. Japie, thank you very much. I'm going to use your age. You are probably the eldest on this panel. From your point of view, if you look back, what is the difference between guys that make it and guys that somewhere get themselves into trouble?
Sustainability. You have to take cognizance of what's happening around you. You have to live and have the family around you to live. With the family, I mean your input suppliers, the Senveses of the world, your bank, your neighbors, your commodity organization. If you don't live within the sphere of the whole group, you're not going to make it. And if I look back, people looking after their cash flow, it's actually, I've experienced where we sold out people, farmers, who in the end had a net
Positive
value, because they couldn't 100% deliver on their cash flow. So it's very important. On top, we've mentioned diversity, but never jump. Experience a casual flow of what you have, what you can afford, what the rest of the family advises you to do. For example, what does the market do? It's not going to change overnight in China or America or South America. It changed gradually. A surplus is not going to work away in 1 year. It'll happen over 2 or 3 years. So don't jump from maize to sunflower to whatever.
And keep an eye on the cash flow.
Gradually.
Keep an eye on your cash flow.
Exactly. The most important is to be aware of what your cash flow will allow you, and inform the rest of the family. Work with your bank. Never let your bank or your cooperative or your agricultural company not be aware of exactly what's happening within your cash flow and your business.
You used an interesting term when you started with the family and partnerships. You view that as a bigger ecosystem that you have to operate in, and everybody needs to buy into it.
You cannot farm on an island. You have to live within that community, and you have to take that community with you. If you succeed, Senwes will succeed. You'll see the dividend in the end of the year, and it'll come back to you. You'll see you have a successful company. You'll have a bank able to help you when you have to buy the new farm. And in the same vein, we're talking about the successful farmers. Unfortunately, the new and the small, and especially the farmers of color, are struggling to make it, especially nowadays.
We're going to come back to that just now. Richard, Richard has been farming for more than two decades. He's not that old. But Richard is also
I look at you, sorry.
been for the last decade involved in organized agriculture. And for any of you that drive on the N2 from Cape Town up towards the Southern Cape, will go past Boontjieskraal. I didn't know, but just like we up north have stories about the Creer Miljoene, they've got stories about the ghost of Boontjieskraal. And a friend of mine who was at school there told me about it. His dad always told them when they went through that little white wall of yours, talk about the spook of Boontjieskraal. But Richard, Japie talked about cash flow. Is farmers focusing on the right measurement instruments when they look at their yields?
I think we've been so focused on yield over years, we've been indoctrinated to focus and chase yields. And I think there needs to be a change, and a change of this indoctrination to chase rands and not tons.
So we shouldn't continue to talk about tons, we should talk about rands.
We should talk about rands per hectare. I mean, that's the measurement that brings cash into your business, that manages the cash flow problems Japie is referring to, the formulation of capital that you're talking about, access to capital. Money makes money in terms of agriculture. Our balance sheets look very strong, but your ability to generate cash in any business, that's important. Tons don't necessarily bring you cash flow. Margins, rands per hectare, in terms of the return on the asset that you're sitting on, that is what's going to make you profitable and sustainable in the long term.
And that's what you should measure when you talk about your farm operational margin.
We talk about expansion, and there's been a lot of focus on expansion, trying to find, diversifying and expanding in terms of economy of scale, etc. But we really need to focus on every hectare, every square meter on your farm. Can you put seed and inputs into that square meter, and can it give you a return?
A positive cash flow, not
positive. In terms of your return, if that square meter is bringing you a loss and you cannot generate at least a contribution to the overhead costs and a further return, take it out of production. Look at utilizing that land in a way that it will bring you rands per hectare. We chased and the hybrids in maize brought a big change to tonnage and helped a couple of years ago the profitability of the summer grain cropping systems, etc., the growth of the soya industry and that. And I think a lot of hectares came into production that in current times need to be taken out of production to ensure that per meter square you're making a profit and it's making a contribution to your sustainability going forward.
Ansi, I want to come to you. You were last year the grain farmer of the year, but you also, that's a generational trait. It's in your DNA. The previous generation was also grain farmer of the year. I want to talk about this principle that we touched on about cash flow. And cash flow being the driver, and I think Japie noted it, that sometimes people say, specifically in agriculture, they could be asset rich and cash poor. And that's the challenge where they find themselves. I remember Jannie Mouton always used to, when he looked at the balance sheet, said, that's fine to show all this, what's the cash here? And in not the provisions or not the implied, what's the cash? In your perspective, as a successful grain farmer, if you look at this question about cash flow, return on equity, making it profitable. What's your view?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you must always remember is that cash flow is not a wish list. You have to have a cash flow and you have to stick to it. And nowadays we're doing it every month. We're checking our cash flow, seeing we're going good. So it's very important that you have cash and tougher times where tough like we are now. There's always opportunities coming up, and when you have the cash to buy some more land or anything like that, so you must have cash for a spare time. But coming from where I am, you must look back at the years like this. What happened when there was drought and low prices, and how we managed through it. And you must always remember it, and it's things that you can tell the next generation how we did it. It's not to say it's going to work now with them, but it can help in a way if you can see what you did in those times. And I always say tough times don't last, tough people does. So you must just do what you do. If this year is coming up, we're not knowing what we're going to plant or what. But like Japie said, stay to what you're doing, and you can rather plant smaller but do it good. So yeah, that's in a short my question.
Where does scale come into this, Jaco? We continue here, the margins, it's a low margin business, high capital intensive. You have to make sure that you're at scale. Where does scale come into this?
I think scale is a big buzzword, but it's not scale as sense, it's driving efficiency. And I think scale is part of that driving of efficiency. The fact that you have scale isn't a guarantee that you're going to survive.
You can fail on scale as well.
Yeah, and there's been many examples of that. The fact that you have scale isn't also a prerequisite. So you've got many small farmers that's also making a big success. But scale is part of that driving efficiency, and I think that's why we need as farmers. It's not because my neighbor is farming better than me, I have to improve my efficiency. It's because the rest of the world is getting better and better. And that's why you need to produce more tonnage. The cost squeeze is constantly on you. It's not the first time that we've seen it, but it's something that you need to drive efficiency. Precision agriculture, scale, better buying, better selling, making better decisions, having data, having information, all that to drive your efficiency, to be more effective, driving that rand per hectare, as Richard is saying.
Japie, scale from your point of view, you've seen people come and go. What's your view on scale?
Efficiency is more important than scale. You can be very efficient on a smaller scale, and scale does help you. If for example, if you have a variation of what you're doing, and another thing, if you have maybe a farm in 2 or more districts, or variety of what you produce, then scale does help you. If you struck a drought or a excessive rain in one area, you might have a good crop in another area. So scale is very important, but not as important as cash flow and being able to run whatever you're doing, each commodity, each farming opportunity on its own merit, with its own cash flow, never to cross-subsidize. It's the beginning of the end.
Once you cross-subsidize, you're starting to incur inefficiencies in the capital process.
Exactly.
Richard, your view?
Yeah, I want to make the point, we mustn't create the impression that we say you have to solely use cash to operate and to farm. We do borrow. Our agricultural grounds, our level of exposure is 53% of our agricultural grounds are given as cession, as security to operate, or as a result of purchasing the properties. So we do have debt, but we need to be cash flow positive in terms of repaying that debt and utilizing, because borrowing money helps to formulate capital. So I kind of want to make that point, that we mustn't create the impression here that we must all move to a cash system and get rid of debt.
Well, if you tell me in any industry, and we'll get to the volatility now, if you say to me, my return is 15, 17, 18%, and my cost of capital is 8 or 10%, then it makes sense to have some kind of leverage in the system.
Absolutely. And then when we talk about the sustainability and that, we must realize that agriculture, unfortunately, we're price takers. and we buy retail and we sell wholesale. We can't move away from that. So within the system, we need to manage that and security. This is the reason our agricultural systems is built on title as security to obtain capital, to utilize that capital in production, generate enough cash flow to be cash positive, to service that debt and make a profit. And I think that's important. And when we're talking about the development sector, etc., obtaining title is an integral part of the farming systems and the structure in South Africa and all the Financial Service Board regulation, etc. It's important that we operate within that structure. When we talk about the efficiencies and expanding, it doesn't have to be buy more ground. It can be integrated within you can expand horizontally within your own operations to generate other avenues of cash, to diversify, to make yourself bulletproof in the event of catastrophic events or price fluctuations or pressures on margins, as it would be rands per hectare. But you can also look outside of agriculture to further investments, to help create other streams to support your business. So you build a business network, other industries and associated value chain exercises, and Hansi and others can tell you how they've integrated their businesses into the value chain, which is important. The maize still needs to be milled, it still needs to be packaged, it still needs to find its way to market, to get involved in that, or buying shares in a company like Senves. It's a way of also bulletproofing your returns and the cash that's generated by your business. We're primary producers. I want to have manure under my shoes and grease under my nails. The reality, we're business entrepreneurs and we need to manage our businesses accordingly.
Hansi, from your point of view, Richard's talked about integration, horizontal and vertical. Your view on that?
Yes, Theo, dis moeilik, nee, maar ou moet horisontaal uitbrei, geografies verseker, want
risikoverspreiding.
Versprei jou risiko geografies, en vertikaal moet jy maar waar jy kan betrokke raak in die ketting betrokke, maar ons sê ons maar altyd van grond tot mond, maar dit is nie so maklik nie. Onthou, dis twee heeltemal uitlopende besighede as jy praat van 'n meel in 'n boerdery. So elkeen moet maar op sy besigheidsbeginsels rus en dan kruissubsidiering, ons doen dit natuurlik, Japie. Ons boerma moet beeste en ons besproei en ons plant sojaboontjies en mielies en ander goed. En een jaar maak jy een ding nie geld nie en die ander jaar maak dit. So jy kan nou nie, as die beesboerdery die jaar nie geld gemaak en nie uit hom uitklim, en volgende jaar doen hy weer. So hulle loop maar saam. So jy moet maar net die balans handhaaf tussen die bedrywe.
Maar ek dink tog a principle of diversification that I do think sometimes people miss is diversification specifically means that everything shouldn't go in a straight line. Then you're not diversified, because then it's a common risk that will impact everything. Diversification per definition means there will be times when one or two of those businesses will need to support some of the other of those businesses. Jaco, we live in an era where we see farming units getting bigger and farmers getting less. How do you, that must be a terrifying environment to farming.
It certainly is, but I think it's the same for business as well. What we've seen in the farming is that we lose about half our farmers every 15 to 20 years. And you can see that when you drive around in the country, the empty farmhouses, the empty shops that you see. But it's not a South African reality, it's an international reality. It's coming back to driving of efficiency. And that's why you constantly, as a farmer, needs to evolve. You need to get better. You can't do the same thing that you did 10 years ago and expect a different outcome. You need to be better. You need to improve constantly to be in that 50% that's going to survive in the next year. It's a sad thing because you've got farmers that falls out. It's a sad thing that because that farmer that's very good now is not necessarily good in 15 years. And that makes it difficult. That's capital intensive. You need capital to invest. You need minds, you need people, you need a lot of input into that. And that's where the family that Mjaap is talking about is very important. As a farmer, you can't think of all this, but you need your partners around you to be able to survive, to help you, to assist you, to be better, to drive that efficiency, but at the end of the day, to survive, to be sustainable on your farm.
So the point is, I always, my view is that the government is not going to end up with your farm. Your neighbor is going to end up with your farm. Not because of some policy, because he's more efficient than you are. But let me take the discussion and start to look forward. We know we're in an area where, on a period where in the next few years, we're probably going to see higher input costs, specifically in this coming year, as the oil price stays high, as the input cost stays high. Commodity prices are not moving in the same direction. We're probably going to have in this area adverse weather coming forward, and Debbie noted that. If it's a super El Nino or just an El Nino, that's debatable, but the weather forecast doesn't look good. How do you, Japie, this is not the first season that you've looked at that people are questioning to what extent it's going to be viable. How do you approach the season?
Careful. No, we've been through this. As mentioned, we've lost a lot of farmers. And I think the main aim is to stay in agriculture, to keep on earning more than the cost of money, more than that 8% we've spoken about. And the 15% is not guaranteed.
No.
For this next year, we're going to see maybe 8.2%. But that's still good enough for us being in farming right now, the bigger farmers. Unfortunately, the smaller, the young, the new farmers, they're not making it. That's why we see less and less farmers keeping on and being in agriculture every year. And that's why we have this phenomenon in South Africa that we need new farmers, but we cannot afford to get new farmers into agriculture because they don't have the collateral, because they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the market abilities, they don't have the research and extension. And that's the real problem. And especially for our new young farmers as well. We have to take care of them. We have to help them, introduce them into agriculture. We have to help them to not be afraid of agriculture, but to be proud farmers of the future. And that's the main question for today.
Richard, you guys are very involved in developmental farming, and that I put in the broadest text of the word, getting new people involved and broaden that. Give us a bit of background as to what you believe is needed to keep that momentum and to, at some point, sit here and have more successful commercial farmers from a broader range of the society.
If I can take a liberty, I'd like to say that I've seen an increase in young farmers in terms of traveling around the country with our regional engagements with our members, etc. A lot of youngsters coming through, and that's really exciting. There's a renewed rejuvenation from the youngsters, renewed interest in agriculture, which is super because, you commented that I'm 2 centuries old, but we want to see, I look good for it, but we want to see the young people coming through and succeeding the older generation and bring down the average age of farmers. And in the developmental sector, there's also renewed interest, and transformation is an imperative, and we need to be involved in that. The backbone, and I mentioned it earlier, is access to land. Now, we will engage
with a certain tenure right.
With title.
Title.
Not negotiable, with title. You need that title to act as part of your buffering system. So you diversify your business, you ensure that you have various income streams to manage risk. It's about managing that risk, and then you need efficiencies within your business. Now, title is like having cash in the bank. You can use the title to sponge your capital needs in terms of it becomes a catch net situation. Without that, we're seeing the success that we've had in developmental arena has been limited. What have we done? We started out as a country giving farmers a lot of grants, etc., with no catch net. We didn't have a multi-peril insurance system across the country. So we want to see government's involvement in that to put insurance similar to Sasria that's multi-peril that can act as a catch net for our farmers. With the extreme weather conditions and catastrophic events like we're experiencing, we need a catch net and we need government to help drive and for the sector to be involved in that. We put money into the development sector and grant. We then moved away from that and said, go to blended finance, soft loans, etc. They need to be schooled in managing finances, etc., but with no catch net in place. We then said if they fail to repay, they're kicked out of the programs. But if it is a catastrophic event and he was an excellent farmer, but he's got no reserves to fall back or title to fall back on to restructure debt, and we're working with the banks as well, looking at restructuring the requirements of security when you restructure that has to go up exponentially, and looking at varied aspects of the regulation at the moment to better suit agriculture. It's important that the development sector gets the catch net, but also gets title. It's imperative. The system cannot work. We've lost billions in rands in the development sector because we didn't have that in place.
And you take that all the way back to this underlying catch net in some other way. Interesting, I was in one of these panel discussions, a farmer once said to me, the difference between a great farmer and a struggling farmer is how was the weather in your first 3 years of farming.
Yeah.
If you had great weather in the first 3 years, you're a great farmer. You'll always be a great farmer. If you had bad weather in the first 3 years, you're going to struggle for 10 years.
But further than
And
that,
there's nothing you did differently.
If you came into farming in lean times, you tend to be very conservative in your capital expenditure and formulation of capital. You build reserves more eagerly than if you came into farming in the top of the cycle. So you came in on the dip. We see it in
always
agriculture. You tend to be more conservative and ensure that the reserves are constant and held on to get you through the bad periods.
Let's look forward. Let's take the next part of the discussion looking forward. The key question that Debbie put and that we saw in the intro is, if you had the choice again, would you farm? And I want to take that one step further. If you take the balance sheet value of your farm and you look at that value, would you still make the decision to farm? I'm going to start with you, Ansi.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, farming has never been a work for me. It's my hobby. So I think that in short can answer it. But as ek mos oorgevat het, ek sal baie goed verander het, ja, want met die tyd kom ons nou maar raad en wysheid en jy het foute gemaak, maar ek sal verseker weer geboer het. En hoe die jong mense in die boerdery betrokke raak, jy moet hulle positief hou.
Do you encourage your family to be part of it?
For sure. It's an inheritance I want to keep on. So you must encourage them. Jy kan nie die elkant by die braaivleisvuur sit en kla. Things are going bad and you think your children is going to farm with you. So you have to keep them positive from small. And a farmer is not made. A farmer is born. You're going with your father or your mother from a small time. And you see what's going on. And that is one big problem in our land with farmers. You think you can just give somebody a piece of land and he's going to farm. I mean, it's a way of living. It must be in your blood, it must be in your heart. Ek sê altyd as jy moet mielies boer, jy word nie wakker, jy skrik wakker. Dan dink jy wie gaan jy nou betaal?
Maar wie gaan jy eerste betaal?
Wie gaan jy eerste betaal? Is altyd alright as hulle my bel dan sê ek vir ek skuld vir Piet Karstens geld, hoekom dink ek gaan ek jou betaal? So. Maar ja, jy moet jou kinders positief en jy moet kinders geleenthede gee. Die kinders moet kan foute maak. You must give them wings so they can fly. I mean, and they must learn to make mistakes, but it must not be so big that it can put you under. You must give every can't be you must give him a brave space in your operation, and never estimate the energy and the new things we bring. I always say, nuwe manne, nuwe planne. The things that the kids come out today. I mean, life is tough for them, and they are super entrepreneurs. Just to stay here to farm, I always say to the young people, you have to be in the top 10% just to have a job, and when to go forward, you must be in the top 3%. I mean, in a 100 meter race, everybody is running 100 sub 10 seconds. So you can't hope to run at 10.2 or 10.3 and
then
Jy
you're
sal
not
nog
gonna-
daar wees. As jy wil boorde toe gaan, moet jy onder die
But
team wees.
the talk around the braaivleis must be about the opportunity and the way, otherwise it ain't going to
for
work.
Absolutely.
Your view, Yapi, if I were to put the exact same question to you, if you can liquidate everything, take that money, go and fish every day, what would you do?
I'll put it back into agriculture. And I'll put it back into my children and my grandchildren, because there is still a future in agriculture. As I started off saying, that agriculture is being recognized right now as the producer of foreign currency, of food, of job opportunities. And we're so fortunate to be in agriculture. We're still making a profit. We have to allow our children and our grandchildren to be aware of that fact. Stop talking the nonsense around the fires, as Hansie has mentioned. Introduce them, help them. They cannot jump into agriculture. It's impossible. It's a huge jump you have to take, and you have to be aware of where you're heading. We have to get farmers of educated farmers. It's not a question of when you cannot make it in school, you become the new farmer. It's exactly the most educated youngsters are the people on the farms right now, and they're making it. They know the soil, they know the quality of production, and they know how to run their capital. We have to be instrumental in introducing them, and introducing them doesn't just mean being positive. It means being beyond positive. Help them to buy shares in your company, so that they can start living with the sandwiches of this world. Start living with the profit of that company, and how this company have to live with the farmer. Start introducing them into cattle farming by helping them to buy their first herd of cattle at school, not after school or after university, so that they can be introduced into agriculture from a young age, be proud to be farmers, and in the end, you'll reap the results.
Richard, your view, if I were to ask you all over again?
As current custodian of our farming operations, which is 10th generation, it's my responsibility to ensure that it's my genetics that continues farming on the ground. So I want to put that down as a founding statement. Would I invest in agriculture tomorrow? For sure. I think the guys on the panel have mentioned it's in our blood, it's a calling. But the reward, I've had my best days and my worst days on a combine harvester. I've had tears of joys and tears of sorrow. When you get inputs and you put them into the ground, and with the guidance of our Lord and Savior, and you create wealth, you create something that is sustainable. It's not mining that's a sunset industry in terms of you stripping something out of the ground. It's going to be exhausted. We're creating cash flows, monies, and the reward that you get out of that in agriculture is, I think, is what we all chase. That reward and that feeling that you've created this harvest is just phenomenal.
That doesn't show on an ROI.
It doesn't show an ROI. The ROIs are there. We're in the bottom of a cycle. But if you're a retailer and a reseller of a product, be it tires, you don't get the same sense of reward within you that agriculture. Now that brings us to managing the risk in the business. Would I invest in it? It's not only an emotional decision, it's a return. We need to make money. We're in the bottom of the cycle. It will turn. Together, and Debbie highlighted that in the opening, and I really liked your statements, Debbie, is that together we will get through this period. It doesn't look good now, but if the whole industry, input and output sides, pull together, we'll find solutions with information and options for farmer to looking at what we need to do long term. Within your own operation, we'll empower our members to move forward. Yapi and Hansie both made a very strong point as well, and I've mentioned this a couple of times from podiums and platforms, is that we must be careful to poison the minds of our children and the next generation with the words that come out of our mouth around the fireplaces, etc. We need to be positive. This is a great industry to be in. It's got a bright future. People need to eat. In every corner of the world, every single person is affected and influenced by agriculture. It's the building block of any economy. It's the absolute starting block. And we have the responsibility in agriculture not only to be invested and successful, and it will turn and we will make the ROIs that Jaco referred to. But this is the starting and the building block we need to take this country forward and the world.
Jaco, I want to change the question slightly because I think I've got a good idea of what you're going to answer. The question I want to put to you is, you are incredibly involved in agriculture entities, in the organizations around agriculture. I talk about Grain SA, Agri SA. Organized agriculture is the word I'm looking for. You're very involved in organized agriculture, but you're also, the same extent, involved in companies that operate within the agriculture value chain. So you're a big player in that respect. Your view of the different moving parts and the interlinkages between them.
I think at the end of the day, you can't have one without the other. And the one feeds off the other both ways, not just the company, the farmer itself. But when you take hands, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2, it's a 1 + 1 = 3.
And then you come to your community that you talk about.
For sure.
That
And
interdependency.
yeah, for sure. And it's not only the company, it's your community as well. It's your church, it's your school, it's everything around agriculture or your agricultural community. And you can't take one and let it grow to the detriment of the other. So you need to have that community. I think the biggest one is you need to have that passion to do that. You heard the passion of the farmers to farm. I think that's a prerequisite for new entrant as well. If you don't have the passion for farming, don't go into farming. It's not a money spinner. That's what we heard. You need to have that passion. One of the audience members, and I won't point him, told me once that sometimes it's cheaper to pay somebody not to come to the farm, a family member or members. So have the right persons, but that's the same with your community. Have the right people, have the right partners.
But then support them to be always to be sustainable with you.
For sure. So allow them to make money as you make money as well, but also carry the risk for them, with them, but let them carry your risk as well. It needs to be a coexistence.
So we in an environment where there's risks, government is not supporting us, the margins are getting put under tremendous pressure, the weather for the next few months, specifically in this area, doesn't look great, but all of you will take the pot of cash and put it right back into your farm if you had that choice again. Am I right?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's take a few questions. I see the timing is at the end. Is there anybody with a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's always an argument being made that there are fewer and fewer farmers in South Africa these days. And some will argue it is a negative, but then some will argue it's not necessarily a negative. So I think what we should, and perhaps you can provide some stats to check how many farmers, maybe in the grain industry, how many farmers were they say 5 years ago? What was the produce 5 years ago compared to how many farmers there were and what it was say today? And I think then you can start to make an argument to see if it's necessarily a bad thing, the reason why there's fewer farmers in South Africa today.
Who would like to answer that question?
I'll take a stab at some of it. I think countries in Europe looked at the history and the rural areas, and as a form of protection to stop urbanization, they introduced systems of subsidies and that to maintain the culture and the heritage in the rural areas and maintain, the rural areas and stop urbanization. And that's fundamentally one of the imperatives of their subsidy system. South Africa, because of economy of scale and margins being under pressure and trying to find these efficiencies, we've all seen the decline in South Africa in our rural areas, and I think this is all concerning to us because we still need the doctors, mechanics, service infrastructure and support in the rural areas to continue running our businesses. The importance of the schools, etc., are important. A mechanic won't come to your town the first thing he's going to ask is, how does the school look? And so that infrastructure and the functioning is important. What we do see is that some communities rally so strong and so well together, they've actually managed to slow down or stop the decline in their areas. And where we don't see strong communities that Jaco referred to, the decline has been much faster. We have definitely, the numbers have reduced, and we've seen that. We see homes becoming vacant or vacated, etc. But there is an economical threshold and size in terms of land area. And one of the biggest determining factors of what that economical size is what do you cost your own business? And what are your own income streams that you use out of that business, your farming enterprise or other enterprises, to look after your family and pay your expenses? And one guy might be on 1,000 hectares and next door 1,000 hectares. One flourishes but drives a late model car. The other one, it's always the newest, best what, and financially struggles in his business. So these factors all play also on profitability and sustainability in the long term, being conservative, building reserves, but the numbers have definitely declined. I don't think we can deny that at all.
I think we need to look a bit bigger than that as well. So the farmer, the business owner is one thing, but you need managers as well, which is in many cases much better farmers than the farm owner, the business owner. So if you look at farmers itself, most definitely decline, business owners. But the farmers, the managers, they still need to manage, maybe bigger units, but they still need to manage. Just as an example, 1984 was up to 2017 our biggest maize yield in South Africa. 4 million hectares, 17 million tons of maize. So we beat that in 2017, and we're going to beat that this year as well. On 2.5 million hectares, the same amount of maize. The farmers was about 18,000 way back in 1984, the maize farmers, and currently we're about 4,000 or 5,000 maize farmers in South Africa. So that's a contribution, but that's a business owner. It's not the manager. It's not the people producing, actually.
It's not the total employment.
Yeah.
But the sad part is we do have in a lot of areas less people in the rural towns.
For sure.
And that has an impact on the doctor being viable, the pharmacy being viable, the shopkeeper being viable, and that is a challenge.
It's urbanization.
But the food production, that's not the challenge.
Yes.
That happens, and it happens on a bigger scale.
Now, you always remember, our farmers, we are makers, we're not breakers. So ons onderhou gemeenskappe, ons vat dit vorentoe, ons breek nie, ons is bouers. So dit is 'n baie belangrike deel van wat ons doen. En dis 'n groot deel van ons legacy wat ons hou op die plase. En ek wil maar aansluit by Jaco se punt. As jy sien, op 4 miljoen hektaar het ons geproduseer 17 miljoen ton. Ons doen dit nou op 2.4 miljoen hektaar. So boere het baie meer produktief geword. Die opbrengsgemiddeld het opgegaan van 2 ton, 2.5 ton na 6,5 ton. En die beste ding wat met ons boere gebeur het, we didn't get any subsidy. So we learn from young, we must stay, as to use Frans' woord, veerkragtig. Jy moet kan verander, jy moet bly by die tye. So ons boere, ons is fiks. Ons weet om te boer, ons weet om te verander. Geen net vir ons die infrastruktuur, ons sal sorg dat die land kos het. As jy kan sien hoeveel boere, hoeveel mense gee een boer kos in die land. Goedkoop kos, genoeg kos. Dit is net, jy kan dit nie glo nie.
Wonderlik. Great, magic, yes.
So the question begs a different answer for South Africa than the rest of the world. It's one thing saying that the trend in the world is farmers are becoming less and less and less. In South Africa, with the history of South Africa, with the political ambitions of people had been promised land, thinking that land is agriculture. This question differs. It prompts a lot of answers. For example, in 1999, the then President Thabo Mbeki asked me, he said, what are you going to do to allow new farmers into agriculture? And I told him bluntly, I said, nothing. And he was very cross. He said, how can you say that in South Africa? I said, because we don't have the opportunity for new farmers to get into the mainstream. they don't have the collateral. As I mentioned, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the research, the extension service, they don't have a government standing behind them, helping them to stay into agriculture. We can do what Richard said. We can try and educate them, we can try and get them into agriculture. But if they don't have the if they don't have the collateral, then they cannot farm. So in South Africa, we have a huge opportunity, but it asks for a lot of what will the word be? Durf en daad in Afrikaans. It's not an easy question, and we still have the same question, and we have to convince the government and the populace of this country that it's not easy to farm. We have to keep the current farmers in agriculture. We have to get new entrants into agriculture. But we have to get a change in the attitude of saying that you can just have a piece of land and be a farmer tomorrow. It's not possible.
Other questions? Yes. We'll come there. Let's first, Donnie.
Steve, ek wil graag hierdie vraag vir Richard vra. Ons sit in Suid-Afrika met 'n stelsel op ons koringbedryf. Ons weet Suid-Afrika se stapelvoedsel is witmielies, maar die wêreld se stapelvoedsel is koring. Ons sit met 'n argaïese koringtariefstelsel wat die afgelope 30 jaar kom. Ons het in 1988 3,5 miljoen ton koring geproduseer. Ons produseer nou 1,5 miljoen ton koring. Waar is die regering se rol om betyds heffings en stelsels in plek te bring sodat die koringtarief beter kan word, dat ons weer selfvoorsienend in hierdie land op koring kan raak?
Ja, dankie Theo. Ek gaan na Afrikaans antwoord. Die vraag is nou aan my gestel in Afrikaans. 'n hele paar jaar terug was ons selfstandig in terme van produksie en behoefte, en die behoefte het effens toegeneem na omtrent 3,4, 3,6 miljoen ton koring, waar ons huidiglik omtrent tussen 1,9 en 2,1 miljoen ton produseer. So omtrent hierna 40 na 50% van ons totale behoefte word ingevoer. Ons het gesien dat as gevolg van die winsgewendheid van koring in die Vrystaat 'n baie hektare verlore gegaan na koringproduksie en oorgeskuif na sojas en mielies toe. Met die oorproduksie in ons voer na sojas uit en mielies, en die oorproduksie en die surplusse wat in ons plaaslike mark is, dit sal goed wees dat hektare terugkeer na koringproduksie, dat ons weer selfstandig raak. Omtrent 10 jaar terug het ons gekyk na die omdraaistrategie van koring en baie goed gedoen, maar die winste het bly onder druk. Ons het hoofsaaklik nou vanoggend gefokus op somergraan produksie en mielies en sojas en meer, en ons sit hier in die Vrystaat vandag. Maar die situasie in koring is veel erger as wat dit op mielies is op die oomblik, in terme van winsgewendheid en die geleentheid om 'n wins te maak. Hoofsaaklik omdat ons kompeteer teen lande wat baie swaar subsidies ontvang van hulle regerings en meer, en ons moet kompeteer op 'n internasionale mark. Nou ons beywer ons nog altyd vir die vrye markstelsel, en ons sê maar, gee vir ons dan net 'n vlak van beskerming in terme van 'n tarief. Jare terug het die bedryf ooreengekom op die metodiek, die basis van berekening van daai bedryf, maar daar was egter 'n probleem met die afkondiging. Hierdie tarief sneller, en die inligting is beskikbaar op SAGE se webblad, en julle kan almal daar gaan kyk. Hy sneller, en dan moet oor 3 ministers se tafels gaan vir implementering, goedkeuring en instelling. Nou dit beïnvloed nou die kontantmark, die funksionering van die marke en die vloei van graan, die likwiditeit van die marke is sulks. Because invoerders weet, hier kom 'n verlaging in die tarief, so hy hou vas, daar's geen transaksies, dit beïnvloed die werking. Ons het toe nou omtrent meer as 18 maande terug gevra die tarief verhoog word in terme van die ooreengekomme metodiek wat gebruik word vir die berekening, en dis omtrent $10 waar dit moet opgaan, waar dit staan op $279 as ek dit nie mis het, na $289. Ons het ook gevra dat die afkondigingsmetodiek geautomatiseer word in terme van soortgelyk aan diesel waar dit maandeliks afgekondig word, en hierdie proses is selfstandig en hy sneller self is soms. Daar is vereistes van die Wêreldhandelsorganisasie en ons betrokkenheid daaroor die periodes en die metodiek en die instelling en die afkondiging van die tarief en dit bring sekere uitdagings. Die aansoek lê op minister Taal van Handel en Nywerheid se lesenaar op die oomblik. Ons het omtrent 2 weke terug 'n brief en 'n versoek aan hom gestuur met die dreigement dat ons 'n aksie gaan instel teenoor hom om sy werk te doen. Nou, terwyl ons vir die vrye markstelsel ons beywer, dis belangrik dat die omgewing en die beleid wat die regering daar skep vir ons laat produseer, want dis wat ons tog moet doen. Die omgewing waarin ons opereer is die staat voor verantwoordelik en die besluitnemingsproses moet versnel word. Ons as entrepreneurs en besigheidsmense moet elke dag besluite neem om ons risiko te bestuur. Maar as die staat sloer met hulle betrokkenheid om die omgewing daar te skep, dan beïnvloed ons vermoë om risiko te bestuur en prysvorming nou met die likwiditeit van die mark en die probleem met die invoertarief. So ek hoop om die week ons gaan in die week nog verder gesprekke hou met minister van Landbou en meer, wat ons ondersteun met hierdie tariefproses en die manier wat dit uitgerol word en ons gaan die aksie verhoog. Ons moet iets doen in terme van genetika, new breed technologies, om die winsgewendheid en die opbrengs van koring op te kry. Ons het laas jaar goedkeuring gekry van die melenaars en die bakkers dat hulle wel wit koring sal aanvaar. Baie groot genetiese pool oor die wêreld, baie groot potensiaal, veral in die droë of die gronde in die Vrystaat, watertafelgronde, veral in besproeiingsgronde. Oom sê, man, ons moenie meer praat van droë lande, dit is klaar droog. So ek is nou huiwerig om die woord op droë lande verbouing in veral die Wes-Vrystaat. Maar gegee die vog situasie en die beskikbare vog, daar is miskien 'n geleentheid in die scenario beplanning vorentoe om koring in te bring as 'n alternatief tot mielies, maar dan moet dit winsgewend wees. So ons gaan dit in ons scenario beplanning 'n baie sterk mandaat van ons lede gekry in Maart by ons kongres om te kyk hoe bring ons weer 800,000 hektaar se koring of 800,000 ton se produksie althans in die Vrystaat terug in die stelsel. Dit gaan weer druk verlig op die mielies en die oortollige produksie daar en hierdie sukses wat ons mielieprodusente behaal op hierdie stadium en hopelik die vraag en aanbod situasie beter balanseer in die land. Maar die winsgewendheid van koring moet nou as 'n oplossing vir die mieliekrisis ook moet aandag kry en ons moet struktureel verander en 'n verbetering bring, winsgewendheid verseker.
Dankie Richard. There was another question.
Ek wil by julle hoor, julle is nou gesoute en jarelange suksesvolle boere in hierdie seisoen wat voorlê waar ons amper hierdie perfekte storm moontlik kan kry. Sal dit wees om dalk te sê, kom ons laat ons marginale gronde oorlê en ons boer kliphard op ons hoë potensiaal gronde, juist met die pryse van die kommoditeite, ons oordrag voorraad waarvan ons gaan praat, verwagting daarvoor. Wat sou julle siening daar rondom wees?
Ek gaan probeer. Ons het dit baie bespreek by kongres. In 2005 het al baie sterk beroep gekom vanaf Graan SA om juis het saai die helfte en dies meer. Dit het nie gewerk nie. So die benadering toe moet ons verander. Ons wil julle bemagtig in terme van scenario beplanning en inligting om te sê, haal die minder produktiewe gronde uit produksie uit. Ons het gepraat as jy nie wins op 'n marginale potensiaal grond per vierkante meter kan maak, as jy nie wins per vierkante meter kan maak, haal hy vierkante meter dan uit die produksie uit. So ons dryf gaan nie wees om te sê in terme van mededinging en dies meer, kan ons nie 'n beroep doen in terme van mededinging, wetgewing en wat, om vir ons boere te sê, sny met 50%. Maar jy moet in terme van jou eie onderneming moet jy daai besluit en ons hoop om julle te bemagtig. Laat ons saam staan en oplossings kry. Uit die aard van die saak, die vermindering in die hektaar en daar waar jy gaan saai, waar jy nie 'n wins kan maak nie. Nou Jaco sal vir jou sê, die data intensive farm management proewe wat gedoen word, waar elke liewe vierkante meter waar jy die potensiaal in veranderlike toedienings doen in terme van waar's die sweet spot op daai vierkante meter of daai profiel van daai grond, is daar gronde wat ons huidiglik saai binne-in of saai wat nie meer winsgewend vir ons kan produseer. Ons moet daai goed uithaal. Dit is wat ons moet doen. Dis deels van waar die oplossings lê. Dis nie die alleen oplossing nie, maar dis deel van die oplossing wat ons definitief onder mekaar moet gesels en in jou eie konteks die besluit neem.
Jaco and Hansie, your views on this?
Ja, ek het begin om te sê, 'n boer is 'n ou wat risiko's hanteer en risiko's mitigeer. En ek dink vir jare is daai een van hoe mitigeer jy jou risiko? Jy het baie sterk risiko van nie winsgewendheid, jy het baie sterk risiko van droogte vir volgende jaar. So wat gaan jy maak? Jy gaan kyk na alternatiewe gewasse. Jy gaan kyk om dalk net jou lande te los. Jy gaan kyk om dalk graan op te koop. Want jy kan hom goedkoper koop as wie jy hom kan produseer. Dalk nie vandag nie, maar jy kon 'n week of 2 of 3 terug kon jy dit doen. Maar elke ou se som lyk anderster, nê. So jy gaan daai som moet maak oor hoe maak jy jou risiko minder. Dit is nie nou die tyd om jou risiko te vermeerder nie. So diversifikasie is presies een van daai goed wat jy kan doen, maar diversifikasie is net diversifikasie as jy jou risiko afbring. As jy jou risiko meer maak, is dit nie diversifikasie nie. So ek dink dis die goed wat 'n ou moet na gaan kyk, maar jy moet in jou eie boerdery gaan kyk saam met jou vennote.
Saam met jou vennote, ek wil daai beklemtoon. This is the kind of year where you should look at your agriculture company, at your input suppliers, at the organized agriculture. This is the year where those partnerships, and there I specifically include the financiers, the take-off people that assist you with the value chain, the suppliers of different goods, but this is that year where those partnerships are critical. Hansie?
Ja, for sure, the guys what in the input chain, they must also come more to the party. Ek meen, ons is nie besig met 'n eendag game nie, ons speel 'n 5-dag wedstryd, en dit voel my so partykeer, hulle vergeet dit, want in so 'n jaar soos die sien almal is op hulle senuwees en almal is elke dag by jou in die kantoor tot jy geteken het vir die kunsmis of die gif en die saad en dan begin almal relax. So ons moet besef, as ons nie daar is oor 'n jaar nie, dan gaan hulle ook nie daar wees nie. En kunsmispryse wat opgegaan het van 5.000 na 15-17.000 rand 'n ton. Ons boere kan nie produseer daarteen nie. So ons sal moet gehelp word ergens. En ons kan ons nie nou net almal op ons plant of boer nie. Jy het hoeveel mense wat afhanklik is vir jou van die jaar. Jy het 'n verantwoordelikheid teenoor mense, dit is 'n gemeenskap. Maar is verseker so, daar's mense wat maar buitensporige winste vat in sulke jare en dit moet aan die kaak gestel word. Die proses moet deursigtig wees, ons moet eerlik wees met mekaar. Ek meen, ons almal is in die besigheid, ons wil geld maak. Maar ons moet maar almal net mekaar 'n plekkie gun onder die son. En dit help nie paar ons boer ry met 7 verskillende klere Bentleys en ons ry met die ou Hilux en volgende jaar is ons nie daar nie, dan gaan hulle Bentleys ook weggaan. So dit is baie belangrik dat ons besef ons is strategies ons 'n lang tyd in.
Ek dink Hansie maak 'n baie belangrike punt en dis wat ons ook ywer dat daar 'n mate van deursigtigheid in die winsneming deur die waardeketting, né? Ons wil hê almal moet wins maak. Enige besigheid moet 'n wins toon om volhoubaar en suksesvol te wees. Maar is die winsneming regverdig? Laat ons dit goed versprei deur die ketting om ons deur die krisis te kry en vorentoe. Ons hoor van chemiese verteenwoordigers wat tot 30% kommissie neem op die verskaffing van insette. R1,500 op irium toe hy R8,000 was. Dis buitensporig in 'n mate. Ons moet verseker en dit gaan nie net oor hy moet ook leef, ons verstaan dit, hy moet ook 'n wins maak, maar dit gaan oor die ROI wat hy op eie kapitaal gebruik kry, né? Sy situasie lyk baie anders as ons en sy wins is gevolglik, sy return of investment is sky high. Ons wil 'n deursigtige stelsel hê, laat ons saamtrek, dat die winste wat verkry word, versprei word en egalig is deur die bedryf.
I think it was the American president about more than 100 years ago, Theodore Roosevelt, that always said everybody must get a square deal.
Thank you.
And the point is, what is everybody's square deal?
Thank you.
And then you can be sustainable if everybody gets a square deal. Another question, there we are.
If I may, I think your session worked because we all want to farm, even though it's going to be a dry year next year. My pot of gold, Jaco, I'm putting it on you. I think we need to ask 2 maybe deeper questions of Hansie and Jaapie. What do you do if you at a point where there's none?
There's no harvest. Almansi, I think you've been there, where not even the cattle is there anymore. No cash flow. What do? What is they ask the question, Japie, wat doen jy as jy daar staan en is droog? En jy moet dalk iets verkoop. How do you motivate people? Because I love the idea that you guys said that we should not talk down on agriculture, but we also know that we sometimes stand at a point, Japie, that I look at you and you say, Japie, wat moet ons doen? It's down in the tubes. And how do you survive up to now? And what do you tell your own people? What do you tell your neighbor in a difficult time like this?
Thank you, dankie Johan. Let's start with Japie,
Doen wat jy mee goed is. Jy weet waarmee jy goed is. Beken en erken jou afhanklikheid. En jou skepper sal jou nie los nie. Begin daar. Maak jou somme en kyk wat kan jy die vinnigste te gelde maak om te oorleef. Want op daai stadium is jou plan dan om te oorleef. Moenie dan begin met jou grond wil verkoop en dan sit jy volgende jaar met trekkers nie. Kyk wat kan jy effektief die vinnigste te gelde maak om te kan oorleef. Ek het dit net nou gesê, wees absoluut deursigtig met jou insetverskaffer, met jou afnemer, jou bankier. Dis amper die eerste. Absoluut. Loop met hulle die deursigtige ooprol elke oomblik. En om net vir die vraag van net nou aan te sluit, doen wat jy mee goed is, maar vertrou ook jou organisasie en ander om hulle deel te doen. Byvoorbeeld die vraag was net nou gewees, wat doen ons in so 'n jaar? En dit is ook in 'n moeilike jaar omdat het uitverkoop. Ek moet ook in staat maak in so 'n jaar dat die staat en my insetverskaffer en my organisasie vir my nog meer gaan help om markte te vind in Mexico waar hulle wit mielies gebruik. Om nog meer mielies uitgevoer te kry as gevolg van die beste kwaliteit mielies in die wêreld na China en na Indië en selfs Iran. As ons daar selfs om te gaan ruil vir 'n bietjie olie, dan is dit steeds die geleentheid om te doen. Om steeds
al olie geruil.
Ja, dis 'n ander gesprek. Op 'n Sondag. om te kyk dat jou hawens se effektiwiteit optel. Om te kyk dat die spoorweë tog weer aan die gang kom, want dit is die goedkoopste vervoermiddel wat daar behoort te wees vir families. So dit is nie een ding of net die een ander een nie. Dis daardie groepering van sake wat met aandag kry.
Nee, Johan, ek dink is maar voet op die grond, hande na bo. Dis maar die antwoord, maar jy moet so 'n bietjie vooruit scenario's beplanning doen. As jy dan net jou beeste kan verkoop 3 maande voor die ander, as jy bietjie voor dit.
Ja.
En dit help nie as daar moeilikheid kom, you living like an ostrich, putting your head in the sand nie. So jy moet nou wees soos 'n eend, rustig bo en perla die hel staan onder. En ek meen, as mens kyk oor die tye, die liewe Vader, vir my, ek plant omtrent 43 jaar mielies, hy het my nog nooit gelos nie, as dit die jaar wees, sal dit die eerste keer wees. So, ons sal weer hierdeur kom, dit sal beter gaan, maar doen net jou beplanning bietjie, versprei jou risiko's, as jy moet nie nou die ding koop wat jy nie hoef te koop nie. En as jy moet verkoop, probeer net so bietjie voor die mark wees. As ek dit raad kan gee vir jou.
Daar's 'n vraag daar agter.
Baie dankie. Moet staan. Johan het my nou so 'n bietjie voorgespring met sy vraag. Dankie vir 'n insiggewende dialoog. Ek het 'n vraag vir oom Japie en oom Hansie. En dit sluit eintlik by Johan se punt aan. Ek wil 'n bietjie praat oor protecting the downside. Ons het in 'n vorige gesprek het ons nou gehoor waar die manne sê dis nou meer in die markte, dis nie in die primêre produksie van graan nie, waar hulle eintlik fokus op, jy weet, protecting the downside to ensure that we got wat het hy gesê, 'n volhoubare, sustainable yield en return oor groot tyd. So, as ons in 'n seisoen is waar ons nou is, waar El Niño op pad is, ons boer marginaal en ons staar moontlik 2 jare van, kom ons noem dit gelijkbreek, of moontlik erger as dit in die gesig. Hoe dink julle oor die oom Japie, jou ekosisteem, en moet 'n mens spesifiek gaan beplan? Ons praat nou van bly op jou knieë, weet, wees soos 'n eend, werk hard, wees voor die mark. Maar as ou pragmaties daaraan gaan dink, moet jy gaan beplan om te sê, hoor, in my ekosisteem van fasiliteite, of dit my co-ops is, en of dit my finansierder en my banke is, dat ek spesifiek moet beplan in hierdie scenario om 2 jare te kan uitsien, want van Theo het dit gesê, die verskil tussen 'n suksesvolle boer, of 'n langtermyn suksesvolle boer en nie, is daar eerste 3 jaar waar die klimaat hom genadig was. So ek dink die barrier to entry is presies dit waar ouens nie harde houe kan vat nie. Nuwe boertjies, nuwe generasie boere kan nie die houe vat nie. So is dit iets waarop 'n mens moet fokus en moet sê, hoorie, ek het in my ekosisteem om Japie, het ek 2 jaar, 3 jaar, wat ook al die seisoen vra om deur hierdie kom ons noem dit maar uitdagende tyd of waar mens niks geld maak nie of potensieel niks geld kan maak nie. Maar ek hoef nie bates noodwendig af te verkoop nie. My skuldvlakke is onder beheer, maar moet 'n ou spesifiek pragmaties gaan sit en sê, hoor, ek het my fasiliteite vir jaar 2 of 3 in plek gesit.
Dankie. I'm going to Debbie. I'm going to ask you after they've answered that same question again. As a agriculture company supporting and focusing on the farmers in this area that we're talking about, the bigger summer rainfall maize area. I'm going to take that question to you as well after the panel answered as to where you believe farmers, your clients and your customers should focus, because you're part of the value chain, and if it's not for the primary producer, your business is at risk. So I'm going to come back to you after the question has been asked to the 2 members it was put to. Hansie?
Ja, dis 'n baie vraag, nee. En jy moet nou maar doen wat jy doen en jy moet realisties doen. Ons het nou al vir aardverwarming, ons plant ons bietjie met oorskare en ons probeer die temperature afbring. Ons temperature verskil al omtrent 30 grade van buiteland tot binne in 'n land met oorskare. En dan sal ons die jaar as op bietjie sny wie kunsmis. Jy gaan bietjie sny op die hoeveelheid plante wat jy sit per hektaar. En jy gaan die risikogronde bietjie uithaal. So 'n praktiese punt is dit wat jy doen, en dan moet jy maar kyk dat jy 'n goeie voerbank het. Die passasiers haal hulle uit jou besigheid uit. Goed wat nie werk nie, slyder vroegtydigheid in. Dis die antwoord wat ek jou kan gee. En vat hande met mense wat jy gaan weet wat jou kan as jy nou vir 2 jaar 'n moeilike jaar het wat jou gaan dra. Want hulle weet in 2 years time you still have to be.
Wees konservatief. Onthou wat jy al geleer het. Ons is almal al deur hierdie situasie, meeste van ons, as jy sê boer 40 jaar, ons boer baie jare. Ons is al deur 'n paar van hierdie truwe. Wees konservatief, wees deursigtig, neem besluite. Die grootste probleem wat ek ervaar het in baie jare wat ek in georganiseerde landbou is, dat mense weet wat jy moet doen, maar neem nie 'n besluit nie. Ja. Neem 'n besluit. As jy 'n fout maak, sê agterna ekskuus en maak dit reg. Maar neem 'n besluit. As jou besluit is om te diversifiseer, om vir jaar meer sonneblom te plant en 'n bietjie te spaar op jou grond wat jy opgebou het op kunsmis, want jy kan vir 2 jaar kan jy eerste jaar dalk 'n bietjie sonneblom plant met minder kunsmis. Die tweede jaar kan jy sojas plant met geen kunsmis. Jy gaan 'n bietjie myn, maar jy gaan dit by jouself doen. Neem net daardie besluit. Oorleef. Jou mikpunt is om te oorleef, sien die eindpunt en werk daarna toe. Hou op klaar, neem die besluit en doen wat jou hand vind om te doen in geloof.
Jaco?
Ja, ek dink daar's nou 'n klomp maniere, so jy kan genoeg dat erfenis het of jy kan gaan finansiering reël dat jy dit kan oorkom. Ek dink dis waar diversifikasie inkom. So jy moet 'n ander bron van inkomste hê wat kan opmaak vir jou inkomste wat jy verloor nou, of ten minste net jou koste kan dra om jou te kan dra vir hierdie 2 of 3 jaar wat dit gaan swaar kom. Maar ek dink die een wat ons nie moet mis nie, in tye soos hierdie is wanneer daar geleenthede opkom lê. Ja. So jy kan jouself gaan bankrot spaar en gaan uitsit en uitmis op die geleentheid wat ook kom, nee. Iewers te weet ons hierdie ding gaan weer draai, iewers te weet ons hier gaan veranderings kom, so of jy kan nou daai geleentheid gebruik om uit te brei, teen die regte prys natuurlik, nee, maar jouself nie onder druk gaan sit om teen die verkeerde pryse te doen nie, maar daai geleentheid om uit te brei, of dan om hierdie mark te benut, wanneer die mark weer beweeg, in watter rigting hy ook al doen, so moenie geleentheid uitmis nie.
Debbie?
Ek dink as mens uit 'n landbouoogpunt uit of 'n landbouorganisasie en as kyk nou korttermyn en ek selfsugtig, dan sê ek al hierdie boere wat eers moet plant 100%, want anders gaan my wins onderdruk wees, maar dis nie die antwoord nie. So ons in ons organisasie, dit was maar so 'n boer het noudag mooi gestel. Ons het 4 champagnejare gehad, né? Ons het baie goed gehad, hoë opbrengste, hoë pryse. So daar's die oorlog, die vorige oorlog het in ons voordeel gespeel. COVID het in ons voordeel gespeel, né? Ons kon geleenthede benut soos Jaco sê. So mens moet gaan kyk en ek stem saam met almal op die paneel. So marginale lande moet jy dalk nie plant hierdie jaar nie en op fokus op die wat jy op kan in beheer het. Want mense het altyd wat jy in beheer het kan jy beter maak. So effektiwiteit in ons besigheid moet dieselfde goed doen. Ons boere is onder druk, so ons moet ook gaan kyk na kostes, moet kyk na effektiwiteite en dan kyk ons na die groter langer termyn prentjie. So ons gaan boere hierdie jaar ondersteun. Ons het produkte uitgesit om te sê moenie jou graan verkoop nie. So een boer sê ek verkoop altyd teen lae pryse want ek het altyd skuld om te betaal. Maar jy het die kommoditeit en sodra jy hom likwideer, dan het jy nou 'n geleentheid as pryse hoër gaan. Want ons weet, soos dit Jaco sê, pryse gaan weer hoër gaan, maar het jy daai tyd om op daai graan te sit. So ons en dis wat ek sê, mense in die waardeketting moet help. So ons gaan vir 18 maande swakker resultate lewer, maar ons gaan ons boere langtermyn volhoubaar maak. So daar is produkte in die mark. Jy kan op jou graan sit, jy hoef nie op jou graan sit, jy kan soos dat Jaco sê, kan gaan graan koop. Goedkoper, maar daar is geleenthede wat jou kan help deur hierdie moeilike tye. Ons moenie net sit en niks doen nie, want dit is maar so, as jy in die krisis sit, niemand kan nou diversifiseer nie. Jy sit nou hierso. As jy nou nie iets gedoen het nie, moet jy die beste van die saak maak. En ons moet ons vennote en ons moet hande vat en ons moet almal deur hierdie volgende 18 maande gaan, want die son gaan weer skyn. Dit is so.
Baie dankie. I think I'm seeing negatives and it's going to be red just now, the counter I'm seeing. So we've come to the end of this session. Just perhaps a final comment. A while ago I was involved with a handover from one generation to the other generation. And the older generation said to his 2 sons that's taking over, said if he looks back over the last 35 years, you guys will probably be in charge for the next 35 years. I had 15 years which I thought was above average, was great, it was good years. I had 5 years which I struggled. I had 5 really difficult years. I had 5 years where I didn't know how I'm going to make it. And then I had 5 years where I should not have made it. And the point is, we're still here. Yeah. So you guys will have the same. You will also have the 5 years where you shouldn't make it. But I made it, and you can make it. For me, the key points today was it's return on capital is there. It's not in a straight line, but it is there. Cash flow is what it's about. Make sure you measure in your farm on cash flow. In a season like this, reduce your risks. Manage what you can manage. Focus on what you're good at. But the most important of everything is, if you had the chance again, you would take that capital and put it right back into your farm. And I think that is why South Africans are positive. And that's the message we need to get to the community, we need to get to our family, and we need to get to the broader agricultural community. It is a great business, and if you had the option again, you'll put all your money back in it again. Thank you very much. I want to thank my panel. I think it was a great panel. We're slightly over time, but thank you very much for everybody's contribution. Thank you very much, and for the people in the audience, thank you for attending. There will be a QR code on the screen. If you've got comments, want to reflect on this, or give input, please do so. We would gladly and happily involve it going forward. There's that fancy picture I was talking about. Please take it and comment. From my point of view, guys, thank you for a magic discussion. I appreciate it, and I look forward to the next few days. Thank you very much, and enjoy Nampu.